What's goody, everybody? Welcome back to Bold Hoops with Jay Hoopa. For today's video, we are going to be making the dream off season for the San Antonio Spurs, who, if you haven't noticed or seen, they have the number one overall pick. So I'm going to say who they're going to draft. It might be a shock to some of y'all, but I'm going to say that, and I'm going to make one trade probably, and then I'm going to talk about what direction they need to take this next year. The Spurs roster is interesting. They have a lot of young players, and they also have some veterans, and some of those veterans you have to look to move on from because you want to rebuild right now. So, looking at this roster, as you can see, at point guard you have Trey Jones. He's an unrestricted free agent. You must look to re-sign him because he's a perfect guy to run the show when you have all these young pieces. He's not a guy that it's going to take 10, 15 shots, but he's a guy that's going to play make. He might average 10 assists, and he's a lot like his brother, and I think he's a perfect guy to run the show. Then you have Devin Vassell, who great young player in my opinion. Gives it all on both sides. Jump shooter. Um, he's a good shooting guard to have on a rebuilding team. He can also develop into a great two-way player. So we're not touching him. Keldon Johnson's interesting. So I think Keldon Johnson could have slight a bit of a market and some value to teams. He's on a 4-year, $20 million contract, but I think you should keep him if you're San Antonio because he does bring it on both sides of the ball. And the Spurs are a team, especially when they're coached by Greg Popovich, they're always going to be defense first. So with young players, you have to have young players that can play defense, or else they're not going to play under Popovich. And then Jeremy Sohan, he's got a 3-year contract. He's a good young player, good defender. San Antonio is really great at developing players, so Sohan will become a great player. Although I didn't like him at Baylor, he pissed me off at Baylor. Like he just seemed like I don't know, he seemed like a Dylan Brooks at Baylor. But in San Antonio, he's got the right coaching around him, so I it'll be interesting to see him develop. Zach Collins, he's garbage. I don't like him. I never liked him at Gonzaga. He sucks. Um, Release him. Just release him. Do us all a favor and release him. No one needs to see him play anymore. Devontae Graham. See, I like Devontae Graham. I liked him at Kansas, but you don't really need him to be here. He doesn't need to be here in San Antonio. He's got a 2-year contract left, making about $12 million. That's an overpay for him. He brings you a lot shooting wise, but it's a rebuilding team. You don't need him. Malachi Branham is interesting. All right, he has a 3-year contract, and looking at this picture, as long as he doesn't sign a contract as big as his head, he's going to be a good player in my opinion. Um, I think he brings a lot offensively, so I like him starting out as the 6-man role, so to speak, on this San Antonio team to come off the bench and whatnot. He's a great scoring guard. I feel like he could be like a Terrence Ross, in my opinion. That's my opinion on Malachi Branham. Doug McDermott, look to trade him. He's a good shooter. He can play somewhat defense, but he's older, and you don't need him on a rebuilding team. And there's 1-year contract, expiring deal. Get rid of him. Get whatever value you can. I will be trading him. Keita Bates Diop. That's my favorite player in 2K. It's like, but he's funny. Um, Unrestricted free agent. You don't need to bring him back. There's really no use in bringing him back. And then Charles Bassey. He's from Western Kentucky, I'm pretty sure. 3-year deal. I like him at the center spot, so I'm definitely going to keep him. If you're San Antonio, you're clearly in a rebuild. You don't need to sign any free agents except for, again, cap filler and roster spots. But there's 2 players that I think if you could trade for, you could be setting yourself up really nicely for the future. The first player is Jonathan Kuminga from the Warriors. He has somewhat trade value, but the Warriors aren't going to move on from him without getting a decent enough return. And San Antonio doesn't really have anything to offer the Warriors. So I don't see the trade getting done. But if there is a scenario where Kuminga was only worth like 2 second-round picks, definitely trade for him. I'd love to see him in San Antonio, but I don't think it's realistic. Next one is Terrence Mann, who's on the Clippers right now. Phenomenal two-way player. I think if he was on a rebuilding team, he could definitely be a top scorer. Well, not necessarily a high points per game scorer, but I think he could give you like 18 points a game with 5 assists, maybe. That's a little bit of a stretch, but I'd love to get him because I think his true nature is going to be a point guard in this league, even though he doesn't run it at all with the Clippers. I think he could definitely be a point guard, especially on the team like San Antonio. And if you got him, you could start him at the point guard with Devin Vassell, who also was a Florida State guy. And if you could move Trey Jones to coming off your bench. Man, that I like the move of picking up Terrence Mann, but again, you don't have a lot to offer any teams, especially not the Clippers. Maybe you could give up Keldon Johnson, but I don't see it happening, so I'm not going to include a trade like that in this video. So yeah, I know I said I'm not going to sign any free agents if I'm San Antonio, but you do have to re-sign Trey Jones. I'm not going to go into why, but very high IQ, good fit here. He'll make sure everyone gets the touches they need on offense, so re-sign him. There's only one trade I'm going to be making in this video, and yes, it's this trade with the Miami Heat. Miami Heat will receive Doug McDermott, who's an expiring contract, but he's a good shooter, and he can bring it more defensively than Duncan Robinson has. And Duncan Robinson fell out the rotation in Miami, and even despite him being a great shooter. But where else would he develop best defensively? San Antonio. So I like this trade because McDermott's expiring. He's on 1 season contract. Miami Heat will do whatever. And they're also looking to get rid of Duncan Robinson. So making a swap like this is a lot. But my big thing in this trade is that you need Duncan Robinson just to provide shooting. And that's what the San Antonio team kind of lacks because Trey Jones, not the best shooter. Devin Vassell is a decent shooter. Keldon Johnson, not a great outside shooter. And Jeremy Shohan can't even shoot a free throw. So get Duncan Robinson. You need it. And then Zach Collins. We're not even. That's the last time I'm mentioning him in this video. He's terrible. Next component is the first round pick. This pick is probably pick 18 if I'm remembering correctly. I will tell you who they should draft. There's a great prospect for them that is here. Before I talk about the draft picks I think the Spurs should make, I am going to be coming out with a not necessarily a mock draft. I'm going to be coming out with a big board because I don't really like the draft order this year, and I don't really like projecting what draft picks are because I think a lot of teams are dumber than and do dumb things that they shouldn't do. So I think it's really hard to predict. And there's also a lot of trades to be had. But I will be making a big board ranking my prospects. So if you want to see that video soon, let me know down in the comments section and make sure to share this video with all your friends and family. So yes, as I've talked about, the Spurs do have the number one overall pick. And there's really no option other than taking the sharpshooting guard out of Alabama and Brandon Miller. Nah. Wembanyama, welcome to San Antonio. Did I get any of you? Let me know in the comments section. But anyways, there's no other way to say anything else besides Wembanyama. And I don't really need to talk about why Wembanyama's the pick. I will say there is a lot of bust potential to be had here because as we've seen, taller players that are as skinny as him normally get injured and are injury prone. So that's my only concern with Wembanyama. I think he's very injury prone. I don't think he's going to be a superstar like everyone expects in his first year because there's a lot of strength building that needs to be had with him. But you can always hope for the best, which is what why he's getting drafted number 1 overall. And then with the 18th pick, the best prospect for San Antonio out in this range, if they get a trade, is Dariq Whitehead out of Duke. All right. 3-and-D guy at Duke. But imagine him playing in San Antonio where he can develop as a scoring guard. Like, you got to realize he was injured all of college. He was projected to be a top 3 pick. He was high school player of the year. He was ranked number 1 in the class. Well, top 3. I don't remember. But anyways, he was highly ranked. And the only reason he's not projected in the top 10 right now is because he was injured. Like, he can shoot the ball. There's no doubt in my mind he's going to shoot the ball at a high level. San Antonio, get him. You can develop him. And then eventually, when you're ready to move on from Keldon Johnson, Dariq Whitehead is right there. Better shooter, too. I want y'all to remember this. Dariq Whitehead is going to be a star 3-and-D player. And here you have it. This is what I project the Spurs 2023-2024 roster to look like if they play it smart. You're not going to need to sign any free agents. You just need to get rid of Doug McDermott, Devontae Graham, and I'm not going to say his name, but the center. And then you can get a young roster that just needs development and to play. And if you re-sign Trey Jones, that's perfect. That's your starting point guard. I don't think he'll leave. I don't think that San Antonio should let him leave. And then Devin Vassell, as we covered, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and then Webby, yes, at center. Devontae Graham, you're going to look to move on from him, but I don't think there's really a market out there for him that both teams would agree on a trade for. Malachi Branham, I think he can definitely... He did play point guard in college. He could definitely play point for you eventually. Because Trey Jones, as good as I think he is a fit on San Antonio, he is going to be a 6th man in the NBA or a backup point guard. He's not going to be a starting point guard on a championship team. Duncan Robinson, he gets good floor spacing around this team that I like. Dariq Whitehead, I definitely think you could start him over Keldon Johnson once Keldon Johnson has... Once you find a trade partner for Keldon Johnson, because he's paid $20 million a season. He's not going to be on this team when it finally reaches his championship potential. And then Charles Bassey, I like him as a backup center. He's not terrible. And there you have it. Thank you for watching. This has been Bold Hoops with Jay Hoopa. And remember, follow me on Instagram and TikTok.